History is filled with epic clashes, but few are as consequential or as brutal as the Mongol invasion of the Khwarazmian Empire. This wasn't just a battle, it was the collision of two worlds, a story of ambition, betrayal, and unprecedented destruction that would reshape the map of Asia forever. Let us travel back to the year 1220 and witness the fall of a mighty empire at the hands of Genghis Khan. Our story begins, not on the battlefield, but with a caravan. In the early 13th century, the Khwarazmian Empire was a titan of the Islamic world. Stretching from modern-day Iran to Kazakhstan, it controlled the lucrative Silk Road trade routes. Its ruler Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad II commanded a massive army and presided over a prosperous, culturally rich realm. He saw himself as the most powerful monarch on earth. To the east, a new power was rising from the harsh steppes of Mongolia. Genghis Khan had united the Mongol tribes and was building an empire of his own. Initially, he had no quarrel with Khwarazm. In fact, he saw the value in trade. In 1218, he sent a large trade caravan to the Khwarazmian frontier city of Otrar, loaded with valuable goods. He also sent envoys with a message for the Shah, proposing peace and trade, addressing him as his most beloved son. This is where everything went wrong. The governor of Otrar, a man named Inohuk, was suspicious of the caravan. Perhaps he was greedy, or perhaps he genuinely believed they were spies. He accused the merchants of espionage and, with the Shah's rash approval, had the entire caravan of 450 men executed and their goods seized. This was a catastrophic miscalculation. When Genghis Khan heard the news, he was enraged. To the Mongols, envoys and merchants were sacred. Killing them was an unforgivable insult. Still, he gave diplomacy one last chance. He sent a second delegation of 3 ambassadors to the Shah, demanding that the governor of Otrar be handed over for punishment. The Shah's response was even more foolish and arrogant. He had the chief ambassador executed, and the other 2 S-beards shaved off a grave humiliation and sent them back to the Khan. The line had been crossed. The Shah had not just insulted Genghis Khan, he had declared war on the entire Mongol nation. Genghis Khan is said to have climbed a mountain, prayed for 3 days, and vowed to seek a terrible revenge. The stage was set for one of the most devastating military campaigns in history. In 1219, Genghis Khan assembled an army unlike anything the world had ever seen. Estimates vary, but it was likely between 100,000 and 150,000 strong. But it wasn't just about numbers. The Mongol army was a marvel of discipline, mobility, and tactical genius. They were masters of siege warfare, cavalry charges, and psychological terror. They gathered intelligence, used engineers from conquered lands, and were led by some of the most brilliant generals of all time, like Jibin. The Shah, on the other hand, made another fatal error. Despite having a much larger army, perhaps as many as 400,000 soldiers, he was plagued by internal divisions and distrusted his own commanders. Instead of concentrating his forces for a decisive battle, he scattered them across his major cities. He believed his fortified walls could withstand any Mongol siege. He had no idea what was coming. The Mongol invasion began like a storm. In late 1219, they crossed the desert and descended upon the Khwarazmian Empire. The first major target was the city of Otrar, where the initial incident had occurred. Genghis Khan's sons, Chagatai and Ogedei, were tasked with its capture. The siege was long and brutal, lasting for months. The governor, Inohuk, fought desperately, knowing his fate was sealed. When the city finally fell, the Mongols showed no mercy. The population was slaughtered, and Inohuk was captured. His punishment was legendary. Molten silver was poured into his eyes and ears, a symbolic retribution for his greed. While the siege of Otrar was underway, Genghis Khan executed a move of pure military genius. He took a portion of his army and disappeared. The Shah and his advisors believed the main Mongol force was tied up at Otrar. They were wrong. Genghis Khan was leading his elite troops on a daring and treacherous march through the supposedly impassable Kizilkum Desert. This was a flanking maneuver on a continental scale. In early 1220, while the Khwarazmian defenses were focused on the north, Genghis Khan and his army suddenly emerged from the desert deep in the empire's heartland. appearing before the gates of the great city of Bukhara. The defenders were caught completely by surprise. The city's garrison attempted a breakout, but they were annihilated by the Mongol horsemen. After a short siege, Bukhara surrendered. What happened next became a hallmark of the Mongol campaign. The city's soldiers were executed. The civilians were gathered in the main mosque, where Genghis Khan himself rode his horse inside. He declared that he was the flail of God, sent to punish them for their sins. The city was then systematically looted and burned to the ground. Artisans and craftsmen were spared, only to be enslaved and forced to serve the Mongol war machine. Everyone else was either killed or driven out. From Bukhara, the Mongol tide rolled on towards the magnificent capital of the empire. Samarkand. Samarkand was one of the greatest cities in the world, a jewel of the Silk Road famed for its mosques, gardens, and libraries. It was heavily fortified and defended by a large garrison, including war elephants. The Shah, having completely lost his nerve, had fled, abandoning his capital and his people. The defense of Samarkand, despite its strength, was short-lived. Mongol tactics, combining brutal assaults with deceptive retreats, sowed confusion and fear. After only a few days of fighting, a part of the garrison surrendered, hoping for mercy. They received none. They were executed. The city gates were opened, and the Mongols poured in. Samarkand suffered the same fate as Bukhara. The city was plundered, much of it destroyed, and a vast portion of its population was massacred. According to some chroniclers, the destruction was so complete that 4 years afterwards, the area was a wasteland. The fall of Samarkand in 1220 effectively marked the end of the Khwarazmian Empire. The Shah, now a fugitive, was relentlessly pursued by Genghis Khan's top generals, Jib and Subutai, in an epic chase across his former domain. He fled from city to city, finding no refuge. His power had evaporated, his armies were shattered, and his empire was in flames. Finally, broken and alone, he died of pleurisy on a small, remote island in the Caspian Sea. The destruction wasn't over. The Mongols continued their campaign, systematically conquering the remaining Khwarazmian cities. Urgench, the old capital, put up a fierce resistance, and in retaliation, the Mongols reputedly diverted a river to flood the entire city, wiping it from the face of the earth. The invasion was a demographic catastrophe. Historians estimate that the population of the region dropped by as much as 75%, a loss from which it took centuries to recover. The Battle of Khwarazm, or more accurately, the Mongol conquest of Khwarazm, was more than just a military victory. It was a turning point in world history. It demonstrated the terrifying efficiency of the Mongol army and the strategic brilliance of Genghis Khan. It opened the way for the Mongols to push further west, eventually reaching the borders of Europe. The knowledge and technology they absorbed from conquered peoples, like siege engineers from Khwarazm, fueled their future campaigns. It is a chilling reminder of how quickly a powerful empire can crumble when faced with an existential threat it completely misunderstands. The arrogance and poor judgment of one ruler, Shah Muhammad II, led to the utter annihilation of his entire civilization. For Genghis Khan, it was a brutal, but necessary, act of retribution that secured his eastern flank and massively expanded his empire. The echoes of this colossal conflict can still be felt today, a story of pride, revenge, and the unstoppable force that was the Mongol horde. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into the past fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more epic stories from history. Let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious.